He said, but now if I was a woman, and by no means am I a woman. He said, but now if I was a woman, and if anybody tells you that I said I was a woman, they're the biggest liar in 6 counties. But now if I was a woman, and he went on about 7 times, and he realized how bad it sounded. He kept trying to qualify his statement. So I'm not going to say that. But the point is, it's a tough situation for women, and especially in these days, with all the pressure, with all the things that go on, and even with Christianity trying to go the opposite of the world, and sometimes putting more pressure on women than even that they should have, because they're trying to go the opposite way. So I realize it's a tough situation to be in, especially in this day and time. Tough situation for young girls to grow up in when they're trying to get to find a husband, and boys are taught that this is the type of woman that you want to go look after, which is not a biblical woman. So it makes it even harder for young girls as they're growing up and becoming women. So here in the book of Proverbs, as we get started here, we're going to just take a quick glance at last week what we said. We said this is basically, when you look at it and you look at the context of Proverbs chapter 31, what you find out is it's a mother's instructions to her son on his 2 biggest threats. And when you look at that, you can see it. And it's basically his 2 biggest threats. And as a king here, she's telling him, you've got 2 threats. One of them's drinking, and one of them is women and sex. And when that's played the same throughout history. You can see it all through the Bible there. When men go down, most of the time it's got to do with either drinking and partying or some type of thing like that, or it's got to do with some woman, and Satan knows what it is. And so does Solomon's mother here. So she's coming in and giving him 2 admonitions here, and one of them's got to do with drinking, and the other one's got to do with the type of woman that he needs to find. And verses 1 through 4 gives us a warning about women and drinking as she gets there and she decides to give that warning. Verses 5 through 9 are the instructions and the consequences of drinking that he would get if he was drinking. And then it comes down to verses 10 through 31, which are instructions and earmarks of the right woman, which we call the virtuous woman. And you get that down there in verse 29. It says, many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. And so verse 10 there says, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. So it's dealing with the virtuous woman. That's the type of woman that she's telling him that he needs to find. Now, we went through 11 women last week that were bad women in the book of Proverbs. And we'll just go through that list again real quick. I won't give the verses, but we'll just name the 11. So as a woman, the Bible here in the book of Proverbs gives you about 15 different women that you can look at. And 4 of them are good and 11 of them are bad, and you can get all their characteristics. You can get everything that you need to know about them and what you need to pattern your life after and what you don't need to pattern your life after. So first of all, what we looked at last week was, of the 11 that's bad, you had a strange woman in the book of Proverbs. You have an evil woman. You have a whorish woman. You have a foolish woman. You have a pretty woman lacking discretion. You have an embarrassing woman. You've got a brawling woman, an angry woman. You have a contentious woman. You have an adulterous woman and an odious woman. And those are your 11 that are bad. Bad women there in the book of Proverbs that you obviously want to be the opposite of. You don't want to have any of those types of characteristics. Then you have in the book of Proverbs, there's 4 women in the book of Proverbs that are good women. You have a gracious woman, that's in Proverbs 11, a gracious woman. And that's a woman that you would like to pattern yourself after. Proverbs 12:4, and also here in Proverbs chapter 31, is a virtuous woman. And then you have in Proverbs 14, you have a wise woman. And in Proverbs 31:30 down there, you have a God-fearing woman. And so there's your good women there in the Bible, that you in the book of Proverbs, that you want to pattern your life after, women. A gracious woman, a virtuous woman, a wise woman, and a God-fearing woman. Now, as we get down here to verse 10 and get started here, there's a lot of ideals that we have about the virtuous woman that we consider and we think about and automatically assume that that's some of the things that it's talking about. And what I want to do this morning is just go through and probably going to go the opposite of some of the thoughts that we've always had, just by going through the chapter and basically just looking at what it says, all right? And so first of all, the passage here is dealing with and it's focusing on her work, all right? So the virtuous woman there is going to focus on her work. And it's not a relationship. It's not her relationship with the Lord. Now, the Bible definitely talks, I mean, there's all through the book of Proverbs, and the whole Bible is going to deal with a lady's relationship with the Lord, and that they need to be clean and they need to be holy. And so there's plenty of places that talk about that in the Bible. And the virtuous woman, obviously she needs to be holy as well. But the book of Proverbs here in Proverbs chapter 31 is not dealing with her relationship. It's not dealing with her holiness. And hold your place here and look at Romans. Go to Romans. I'm not going to say that it doesn't, maybe hit on it here or there, but I'm just saying what the focus is, what the passage is dealing with is not her holiness. And here in Romans chapter 12, you have in verse 1, Romans chapter 12:1, here's what the Apostle Paul said to the church here in Rome. He says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Now when it says, and it makes that statement right there, he tells you two things. He says that you're supposed to present your bodies, and obviously it's a living sacrifice, but how? He says holy and acceptable. And when he says holy and acceptable right there, when he begins to deal with, when he says holy, what he's dealing with is your relationship with the Lord. And it's the clean, you being clean between you and your God, and nothing be between you. Look at, go to 1 Peter chapter 1. 1 Peter chapter 1. First Peter chapter 1, look down in verse 15. 1 Peter 1:15, the Bible says, But as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation. Because it is written, Be ye holy, for I am holy. And so when it talks about holiness, it's talking about you being clean. And in the Old Testament, you'd go there to the tabernacle, and the point was to get clean with the Lord. And it was dealing with your holiness. And the priests there, they were supposed to be holy. They were supposed to be sanctified. So when he deals with holiness there in Romans chapter 12, and he says, present your bodies a living sacrifice, he says holy. He's dealing with your sanctification and being clean and being righteous. All right, he also says over there, he says cleanly, he says holy, and he also says acceptable. And when the Bible talks about being acceptable, it's always talking about being is something that you're doing, some type of work you're doing. Now, also there's an acceptable way to be holy, so it's connected to it at times, but most of the time it's going to deal with your work. Look over at, go to 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy, and there's plenty of verses here. That's going to show the difference. And we as Christians, we are supposed to present our bodies a living sacrifice. And there's a work that we do. There's a work that we're supposed to perform. And there's also our walk with the Lord, our relationship, being sanctified, being holy. And here in 1 Timothy chapter 5, let's start in look at verse 3. 1 Timothy 5:3. He says, honor widows that are widows indeed. Look at verse 4. But if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home, and to requite their parents, for that is good and acceptable before God. So when he talks about being acceptable, he's talking about something that you're doing, something that you've been working at, something that you're doing. Your works need to be acceptable. And so in Romans chapter 12, when he says, present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. So what he's saying is there's a holiness that you need to have as a Christian, and there needs a work that you need to have as a Christian. Both of them. You need to present your bodies a living sacrifice and be doing both of them. Now, go back to Proverbs chapter 31. In Proverbs chapter 31, what you're dealing with here is you're dealing with a woman's work, not her holiness, not her relationship between her and the Lord. Is dealing basically with what she does, and that is what sets her apart. Her work is what sets her apart and what makes her virtuous. All right, it's work. Now, as you go back to Proverbs 31, hold your place there and go to the book of Ruth. For years, there's been a pressure put on women, especially about Proverbs 31. And what happens is a lot of stuff gets thrown in there with it, and it's a lot of pressure. But what you find out is over here in the book of Ruth, so you're going to get a virtuous woman there in Proverbs 31 is going to be judged on maybe her husband and the way her husband acts, or that type of thing, or maybe how her children acts, or the way they are. And what you find out is when you go to the book of Ruth, look at Ruth, book of Ruth, get verse 11. Ruth chapter 3, verse 11. And so here's Boaz, and he's talking to her, and he says, verse 11, it says, and now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest. For all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. So Ruth is called a virtuous woman, and that's, matter of fact, that's Solomon's great-great-grandmother. All right, so when you look at that right there, now let's go over to Ruth chapter 2. Go to Ruth chapter 2 and look at verse 4. Ruth chapter 2, verse 4. And so you know the story there. Ruth comes back with Naomi, leaves her mother and father, comes back over here with Naomi, and goes back to where Naomi goes back to the Lord. She goes with her. And in verse 4 here it says, and behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered him, the Lord bless thee. So Boaz has got this field out here, and Ruth is working in the field. And you get to verse 5, it says, Then said Boaz unto his servant that was set over the reapers, whose damsel is this? And the servant said, that was set over the reapers, answered and said, it is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and hath continued even from the morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. So basically says she's been working all day long. She's been working all day long. And it says, then said Boaz unto Ruth, hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field, neither go from hence, but abide here fast by my maidens. Says, let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? And when thou art athirst, go into the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. So he points at her and looks at her and says, look, here's what I'm going to do for you. I want you to do this. I want you to stay with this. I want you to stay in my field. You go over here, and when you get thirsty, you drink out of these vessels right here, and I'm going to take care of you. Basically, he says, I'm going to take care of you. And when he tells her that, she looks at him, and she says this in verse 10. Then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said unto him, why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? Now remember, over in chapter 3, he said, everybody knows, Ruth, that you're a virtuous woman. All right? Now look at verse 11. And Boaz answered and said unto her, Ruth 2:11, and Boaz answered and said unto her, it hath fully been showed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law, since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother in the land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people which thou knewest not heretofore. And here's what he says in verse 12. The Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. So what you find out is that he calls her a virtuous woman, and Boaz, all he knows about her is that she left her country and she came back here. And he called her a virtuous woman. Why did he call her a virtuous woman for? Did it have anything to do with her husband? She's not married. She ain't got a husband. What about her children? She ain't got no children, does she? No. So the focus is on what? Look back at verse 12. The Lord recompense what? Thy work. So you know what he's looking at? He's looking at the work. And he's saying that's why you're a virtuous woman. And in Proverbs chapter 31, although Proverbs chapter 31 is dealing with somebody that's got a husband and got children, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Young girl is 14, 13, 12, they can still be virtuous. You say, why? According to how they work, how hard they work. Are they lazy or do they work hard? That's what it's coming to. So when you go back over to Proverbs, go back to Proverbs chapter 31. Go to Proverbs chapter 31, and when Bathsheba is talking to Samuel here, and he's talking about what type of a woman is the type of woman that you need to go after. It's someone that's going to be a hard worker, and then they're not lazy. And you can see all the different things down through here that shows that. Now, just to split this chapter up, to split the chapter up better, and you look down here, or at least the last part of it, 10 through 31, you can split it up in this. Verses 10 through 12. Verses 10 through 12 show the benefits of a virtuous woman. Because now what he's saying is, this is what my mom was telling me. And when she says this is the type of woman you need to have, Solomon, verses 10 through 12, they show the benefits of that type of woman. So if you look for this type of woman, this is going to be the benefits of it. That's verses 10 through 12. Verses 13 through 24 is going to show the work of a virtuous woman, what type of work she's doing. It shows how she works. Then verses 25 through 27 is going to show the description of a virtuous woman, how you can point her out, how you can see her, and how you can tell if a woman's virtuous. What are the things that you're going to look for? That's verses 25 through 27. Verse 28 is the reward that a virtuous woman receives. And then verses 29 through 31 is basically just a conclusion of a virtuous woman. So you have the benefits of a virtuous woman, 10 through 12, the work of a virtuous woman, that's verses 13 through 24, the description of a virtuous woman, that's verses 25 through 27, the reward of the virtuous woman, that's verse 28, and then the conclusion of a virtuous woman, that's verses 29 through 31. And when you get through these verses down here, what you're going to realize is all this stuff's got to do with her working. It's all got to do with her working. And it's all in the context of somebody else. And when you look at Ruth and you see what Ruth did as the example, Ruth left her mother and her father. She left everything she knew for one purpose, and that was to take care of Ruth, or to take care of Naomi. And so she left, and she came back, and she was taking care of Naomi. She went out and she gleaned. She went out and she worked. Naomi would say, go do this. She went and did it. She worked harder than anybody else that was there. She didn't take any breaks hardly, and she was noticed. She was noticed for that. For what? She was noticed because she's a hard worker. And that's the thing that she's going to be known for. Now, when you look at verses 10 through 12, just to break this up a little bit here, you're going to have 10 through 12. It says this. Verse 10, it says, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. We talked about this last week with the fact of what? Number one, she's rare. She's very rare. It's going to be hard to find someone that's going to be a hard-working woman, and it's all about other people. The context has got to do with other people. It's about sacrificing. And there's some things that the world's going to tell you, young ladies, about working hard and getting a career and all this stuff, but it's all going to be in the context of self. It's all going to be in the context of you, about what you get, about what you reap, about the benefits you have, and how you can make yourself better and you can make yourself somebody in the world. And that's not Proverbs chapter 31 virtuous woman. That's not what she is. It's not about her. Everything that she does, her work, her thoughts, her sacrifices, is all about somebody else. It's all about making her husband look good and taking care of her children, taking care of people that work for her. It has nothing to do with her at all. Nothing. And that's what's going to be hard. And as Brother Dilbert talks about, Bob Jones Sr. said that everything that's bad in this world is a good thing twisted. And Proverbs 31 is going to talk to you about what? About being a good worker. And so the Bible wants you to work hard. The world's going to take it and twist it and going to tell you you need to do it for yourself, for your own career, for your own, pushing your own agenda and being somebody and somebody looking at you and giving you respect and, that type of thing. And it's not that. It's about other people and not just as a woman, but even as a Christian. It's always supposed to be about other people. It's never supposed to be about us. Here's what William Booth said. William Booth said this: I am of the opinion that the chief dangers which confront the coming century will be, so this is when he was ready to die, he said, this is the dangers that's going to confront us in the coming century. It's going to be religion without the Holy Spirit, Christianity without Christ, forgiveness without repentance, salvation without regeneration, politics without God, what? And heaven without hell. That's William Booth, who started the Salvation Army. And you can just look at the Salvation Army today and see how it's changed and what it's for. And you can see how that's in his own company there, his own thing that he started, his own ministry. Now, when Booth was dying, he sent a cablegram to all the Salvation Army stations. And it had one word. So he was on his deathbed and he's getting ready to die. And he sent out a cablegram and it had one word on it. And he sent it out to every Salvation Army station and it had one word on it. And the word was others. It was others. He said one of his last days, he was on his deathbed and was brought in poached eggs for breakfast. And starting to cry, said, there are thousands in London starving, and I get poached eggs. So, still thinking about other people. So when you go back to Proverbs chapter 31, you get what? You get a woman here that the whole description of her here in Proverbs chapter 31 is about sacrifice. It's about sacrifice and it's about working. And that's it. She's working hard and all of her hard work is to benefit somebody else. It's not to benefit her. So you see there, she's rare. It's rare to find somebody like that right there. And it says her price is far above rubies. So she's finding out, Solomon's going to find out this. If he finds a woman like that right there, he's going to find somebody that's rare and her price is far above rubies. She's going to be very valuable to him in trying to accomplish what he's trying to accomplish and taking care of his kids and everybody getting what they need in terms of physical things. And you see all that. And her price is far above rubies. All right, so she's very valuable. Verse 11, it says, the heart of her husband does safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. So she's trustworthy, and he don't ever have to worry about, who's she talking to on the internet, who she been talking to at work. He has no worries about that type of stuff at all. He don't have to worry about whether his kids are getting taken care of. He don't have to worry if things at home's getting taken care of. He ain't going to have to worry about coming home and having a big problem that he's got to take care of. She's taking care of all those types of things for him. He's taking care of his business. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing, and she's taking care of the things so he don't have to worry about it. Verse 12 says, she will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. So you see there, this right here is the benefits of a virtuous woman. And what she's trying to do is trying to sell Solomon on the fact of, this is the type of woman you need to find, Solomon. And when you have young men and they're looking for a wife or they're looking for someone to date, and your parents, this is what you need to push them toward. And you got to push them toward somebody that's virtuous. They're hard working. They're going to work hard. And they're trustworthy, those types of things. And it says she will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. And that's got to do with how she treats her husband. And not all husbands have a woman that's going to treat him good all the time. So it says she will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. So that right there is the benefits of a virtuous woman. So then you have verses 13 through 24, you have what? You have the work of a virtuous woman. And this is split into two things right here. One's got to do with food, and one's got to do with clothing. The first part of the verses up through there has got to do with the food, and the second part's got to do with the clothing. And so what you see first of all is you see what she's focused on. Verse 13, it says this, she seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant's ships, she bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth the field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth the vineyard. All right, so those verses right through there has got to do with food. It's all got to do with her feeding her family. And you see that there in verse 14, has the word food in it. Verse 15 has the word meat in it. Verse 16 has got the word vineyard in it. So it's talking about grape juice, something that they're going to be drinking. So it's food and drink. And you have those there in verses 14 through 16. So what is that? It's got to do with eating. It's got to do with her feeding her children. And so she's going to work. Now, verse 13, before you get there, verse 13, it says, she seeketh wool and flax and worketh willingly with her hands. Verse 16 says that she considereth the field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. So now, what's her focus on? Her focus is on this. It's on wool. It's on flax. And verse 16 is considering a field. Now, that's what her focus is on. She's going to work hard. She's going to be very industrious. She's going to make money. She's going to do things good. She's going to work hard. But what's the focus on? The focus is, it's not, I'm going to have a career. I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to do something. It's not that. What is she looking at? This is what I'm working on, is what I'm going to be able to take care of my family with. It's not about, what do you think your calling is in life? Well, I think I should be this right here, and I think I should. She's got a need to take care of her family. That's what it is. And as a woman, you got a need to take care of your family. And what you do is when you're looking at a job or you're looking at those things, the purpose of it is, I'm doing this. Why? So I can do this over here so I can take care of my family. And so it says that she seeketh wool and flax and worketh willingly with her hands. And in verse 16, she considereth the field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. So when you begin to look at that type of stuff right there and see what's going on. So verse 16, she considereth the field and buyeth it. So she's looking at a field. Why? You know what she's got to know? She's got to know what's a vineyard, what kind of soil does a vineyard grow good in? What have I got to do? Is it a hillside? Is it flat? She's got to know all those things about buying land and buying property and knowing what. She needs to know how much it's worth. She needs to make sure she's not getting cheated on it when she's getting it. She's got to know all those things. And you look today in America and you see these shallow women that's pointed as, this is somebody that's, this is who you need to listen to. Taylor Swift, girls. That's who you need to listen to. Taylor Swift. Do you think she could go out and buy some property? All she does is make songs about her ex-boyfriends. That's it. That's her claim to fame. And the world says, you need to listen to her. This is her political view. Who cares? It's shallow-minded. And they push these girls and these women for you girls to look at and you're supposed to listen to. And then you get in here in Proverbs chapter 31, and you begin to look at this stuff and you realize, you know what? People will say, the world will say, oh, they just want, Christians just want women to be, be at home, be dumb, just raise kids, and that's all. It ain't even near what a Christian woman's supposed to be. But they lay that out there, and then people believe it, and it's not true. You know what you got to be? You got to be smart. You got to have brains to you. You got to be able to consider things like this here in verse 16. You got to have some, not just being simple-minded or being shallow, which is one of those bad women was a foolish woman. Somebody that's just simple-minded that believes everything. So you got to have some smarts to you. You got to be able to understand all this. She had to know all this stuff. Now look down in verse 13. It says she seeketh wool and flax and worketh willingly with her hands. So she's going to work hard, but she's getting wool and flax. Why? That's for clothes. What you make with flax is you make linen. You make linen out of it. Now, I don't know a whole lot of stuff about this, but I have got YouTube. So I have watched a whole lot of stuff on a distaff and a spindle and flax and all this stuff. And here's what I've realized. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time to be able to get all that stuff, to get that. So what you do is you've got to grow that flax. You've got to grow it. So you plant flax, you sow it in April, and then you harvest it in August. And when you go out there, you got to rip all that stuff up by hand. You're ripping it up out of the ground, and you take it all, and you got to put it together. You got to bundle it all up. You put it in stacks. And sitting here watching this guy go through all this stuff on this flax, so they go through it and they get it all. Then they got to soak it in water for 2 weeks. So they put it in water and they put rocks on it and they keep it down in the water and they soak it for a while. And then when they do that, they have to take it out and then they spread it out and they dry it and they keep it all spread out. If you think back to the book of Joshua there, when Rahab hid those spies, it says that she put flax on top of them that had been laid out on top of that roof up there. It was drying. And then you got to go through and you gather it and you stack it all up again. Then you start breaking it down. You take it apart. You take little bundles at a time, and you take a stick and you just begin to beat it like this right here. All the seeds begin to fall out of it, and you go through it just on and on and on with that stuff. Then once you do that, it goes through this thing called crimping, and then once you get that, they have to brush it, and they take it and they've got like a board with nails stuck through the back end of it, and they'll take that flax. It's about 3 foot long. It looks like wheat when you see wheat. And they pull it through these nails, and they just pull it and they pull it and they pull it. And when it's done, it's real fine and it's real. It almost looks like yarn at that time. And then they take that and they brush it and they get it together. And then once they get all that, that's just to get it to where it's down to linen. And once they get it into linen, then they have to take it and they take that and they spread it out, and they take a distaff, which is a big long stick about this long with a end on it that's a little bit bigger than the stick, and they roll it up on this distaff. They sit there and they roll it up, 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 get a big old bunch of that linen around that distaff. So they got this big stick with this linen wrapped around it. Well, then they take this spindle, it's something about as small as this right here with wood on it, and they take it and they begin to pull that linen out, and they roll it up, and they keep it wet, and they roll it up, and they get stuck on that spindle, and they begin to spin it like they spin this spindle, and this linen that she grew is all coming off, and it's going on this spindle. It's almost like a spool that you have a thread on. And they sit there and they spin all that. They just spin it. And there you go. You got one spindle. Then you take and do it again. You say, I don't know. I know this. It took a long time to do it, just watching it on YouTube, eating and drinking, just being lazy watching it. I felt sorry for him. Man. They're working like, man, that dude's working. Man, I bet that's hard. Man, this video's 30 minutes long. And so they go through all that, and you got all that work. And what's all that work for? It's just for the clothing that she's going to be doing for her children. And she also takes it. Now, if you look down in verse 24, look down in verse 24. So it says that, it says, she maketh fine linen, and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. So she uses it for clothes for herself and for other people, and then she uses it to sell, to make money. So now not only does she's making this stuff, so now she's got a business, so she has to know how businesses work. Is somebody taking advantage of her? Is this a good price? Is this a bad price? And she's got to look at all that stuff, so she's got to have business smarts too. Just being able to buy and sell stuff and to make money. So this has all got to do with just taking care of her family. Now, obviously today we don't have to do all that, thank God. And you get clothes and you can buy clothes and you can do this, but a mother's job is to take care of her children. So it's food and clothing. And up here in the first, at the start up here, so she's got in verse 13, this is what she's focused on. She's focused on wool and flax, and she worketh willingly with her hands. And then verse 16 is she's considering a field and buying it. All that stuff right there has got to do with is taking care of her family. Taking care of her family, take care of her husband. That's it. That's the purpose of her working, and working like she's working is for somebody else. It's for the sacrifice. It's not about her. Now, look at verse 14. It says, she is like the merchant ships. She bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it with the fruit of her hands. She planteth a vineyard. And verse 17 starts the next one, talking about feeding, or talking about clothes, that is. So the first verses through there, 13 through 16, when it's talking about the work of the virtuous woman, is just dealing with what? It's dealing with food. And so what happens is she gets up there, you can see there in verse 15, she riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household and a portion to her maidens. So what's she doing? She's getting up early before everybody else, and she's cooking for her household. That means her husband, that means her children, and also the people that's working for her, the maidens, her maidens there. So she's getting up before everybody else gets up, and what's she doing? She's working. She's getting busy. She's fixing breakfast. and she's up before everybody else. And you can see later on down through there, it says that her candle goeth not out by night. So when she starts dealing with the clothes side of it, everybody else is going to bed, and what's she doing? She's staying up and she's working. She's doing her business. She's taking care of her business. That's not saying that she's staying up all night long, but it's 6 o'clock in the evening, when it begins to get dark, they didn't have electricity, so they went to bed, and she has to put a candle on. What for? While kids are going to bed and her husband's in bed, what's she doing? She's working. And it shows how hard she works. And so she's there at night. So you can see there with verse 15 and the verse down there about her candle not going out by night. You can see this. She's not lazy. Along with, when you look down in verse 27, it says, she looketh well to the ways of her household and eateth not the bread of idleness. Hold your place there. Go to Proverbs chapter 12. In Proverbs chapter 12, look at verse 24. It says, the hand of the diligent shall bear rule, but the slothful shall be under tribute. And you can see there, Proverbs, a virtuous woman's what? She's not slothful. She's not eating the bread of idleness. She's not just sitting around doing nothing. She's always busy, always working. And with the food there in the morning, she's getting up early. She's getting up above everybody else. And she's also, verse 16, she's also, after all that, she begins to work. She's out there looking at a field, and then it says that she planteth a vineyard. So not only with the distaff there and the spindle that she works with, she's also planting a vineyard. All right, now you get down to verse 17. Go down to verse 17. So verses 13 through 24 are talking about the work of a virtuous woman. And it's dealing with food, and it's dealing with drinking there in the early part, just what they drink, the juice they drink, and the food they have. And then it gets into the clothing. Now look at verse 17. It says, she girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. And she has to be strong. I mean, for all the work that she's going to be doing and the stuff that she's going to be doing, she's got to be strong. And just from working there and the type of work that she's doing, it makes her strong. Now, you see today talking about things being twisted. You see today there's a big push on women working out and having muscle and all that stuff. But it's all to their benefit. It's not to the benefit, well, I can work and do something for my kids. What's it for? It's so they can look good and they can get on social media and post bikini pictures and all that stuff. It's all about them. It's all about getting their due reward. And it's always a good thing twisted. And it's good that a woman be strong. Why? Because she's got to work. And she's working. You think about when Jacob saw Rachel. Remember what was happening? She's picking up all that. She's picking that stuff up. She's running over there and she's feeding those camels. And she's coming back. She's feeding this camel. And she's coming back. She's feeding this camel. And Eleazar's sitting there and he's watching her. What's he doing? He's watching her work. And he's sitting there thinking, man, this woman, she's a hard worker. You're not going to do all that unless you're strong. So you got to be strong. That's not figurative there. Now, there's a spot down here later on where you can tell it's talking about figurative, but there it's just talking about being strong, not being weak. Verse 18, it says, she perceiveth that her merchandise is good, her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry, her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. So from 17 to 24, the context there is just clothes. Now, just in finishing up here this morning, when you run references to linen in the Bible and wool, which is what she has, and you can see what all that the Bible talks about is made from it. In Genesis chapter 41, there were vestures of fine linen that was made. Exodus chapter 26, you had curtains that was made out of linen. So when we're talking about that, all that flax and the linen that they made out of that flax, and when they made material out of it, that's what they made. They made curtains. Exodus chapter 26, they made a veil. Exodus 26:36, They made hangings for the doors in the front of a door. There's just a hangings there for the doors. Exodus chapter 39, they made coats out of linen. Exodus 39:28, they made bonnets and breeches, which is what we called them when I was growing up, Brother Ben. Called them breeches. And a mitre. And then Exodus chapter 39:29, it was a girdle that they made out of linen. Ezekiel chapter 27, they made sails for sailboats. They made it out of linen. And even in Matthew chapter 27, the Lord's grave clothes was made out of linen. And so they take that flax, and they make that linen, they make clothes out of it, and use needlework for it. And that's some of the things there that they make in the Bible. And then you got wool. Wool was things that had just garments it talks about, and it talks about clothes. And in Leviticus chapter 19 and Deuteronomy chapter 22, it said don't ever mix linen and wool. If you was going to make clothes, they wanted you to have it as either wool or it was just linen. It wasn't mixed. You can see there, talking about the singers there that David had in Chronicles, it said, the Bible says that they were all arrayed in white linen. Maybe that's why choirs always have them white robes on. I don't know, but I just thought about that while I was reading through there and studying this week about that type of stuff. Solomon had linen yarn brought out of Egypt. And you see this Proverbs 31 woman right here, and you see all the stuff that she had to go through to make that linen and to make that stuff that she got. And when you start looking at Proverbs chapter 7 and looking at the strange woman, it's a part there where she's sitting there and she's trying to tempt that young man, and it says that she has bought her linen. She bought linen, fine linen out of Egypt, and she brought it there. She bought it. So you got the strange woman there that was buying linen, and you got the virtuous woman over there that was making it. And then you see the difference right there, and you see the difference in those two types of women. And so before we get into the type about the clothing and the context there with the clothing, just notice two things. There in verse 20, she stretcheth out her hand to the poor. Yea, she reaches forth her hands to the needy. Now there's a lot of ways that you can help the poor and you can help the needy. But the context here is what? It's clothes. So she's making clothes for who? For the poor and the needy. So she's taking care of her household. She's taking care of her husband. She's taking care of her maidens. She's taking care of herself down through there. She's making her own clothes. And she's making enough for what? For the poor and the needy. And you look down there in verse 23. It says, her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. And that verse seems kind of odd sitting there unless you try to connect it to Boaz somehow. But the context down here is the clothes. Her husband is known in the gates in the context of the clothes. And so he's standing out. The way he's dressed and the way he looks at the gate, which is basically the courthouse, and you're going into the courthouse, you're going down there and doing business, and when people see her husband, he stands out. He's different. Why? They say he's known because of who she is and because of the clothes that she's making. I mean, today, you get a woman that she makes sure she irons her husband's clothes. Why? Because she wants him to look good when she gets out. Because why? Because that's a throw off on her. If he's out in wrinkled clothes and stuff like that, they don't think of him as looking bad or being bad. They're just thinking, man, don't look like his wife ever irons for him. And it's like, so what is that? That's a virtuous woman, somebody that works hard. She works hard. She takes care of her whole household. So next week we'll get into just more about the clothes and the virtuous woman there. But remember this. This chapter here is dealing with her work. It's not dealing with her relationship with the Lord or her holiness, her sanctification. It's dealing with how she works. A virtuous woman, the context there is dealing with her work. All right, let's take a break.